like this.
Ah, okay, okay.
Here is the perfect place.
We decided to present in a way ourselves in the religion studies that are connected to history of religions, for example,
Io mi occupo solo del video.
the meaning of this person not teacher, is professor in history of religions and professor
Forse qua.
professor in history of Christianity. But I leave the floor to Professor Doctor to introduce this session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Saggioro, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor to open this Congress and to introduce our first keynote speaker. Professor Alberto Camplani is full professor in ancient Christian literature at Sapienza University of Rome. But before holding his current position, he worked as a researcher in Egyptology and later as an associate professor in the history of Christianity, so he has a full perspective on Christianity. His research focuses primarily on Eastern Christianity during the first 5 centuries of our common era, and he is a distinguished scholar in both Syriac and Coptic Christianity. Professor Camplani is also the director of a master program in culture and religion here at Sapienza University of Rome. It is also editor-in-chief of the journal Adamantius, which is the journal of the Italian research group on origin and Alexandrian tradition, and is also author of numerous monographs, edited volumes, and scholarly articles. No me había preparado para presentarlo en español también, pero le voy a dar un par de datos en castellano. El profesor Camplani es profesor ordinario en literatura cristiana antigua aquí en la Sapienza Universidad de Roma. Pues antes de volverse full professor en literatura cristiana antigua había trabajado como investigador en egiptología y como profesor asociado en historia del cristianismo. Sus investigaciones se centran básicamente en el cristianismo oriental durante los primeros siglos de la era cristiana y es un investigador distinguido en el cristianismo siríaco y el cristianismo copto. Es el director de nuestra maestría en cultura y religiones aquí a la Sapienza Universidad de Roma y ha sido director para muchos años de nuestra revista de Historia de las Religiones, Studi, Materiali di Storia delle Religioni, pero ahora es también el director editorial de la revista Adamantius, que es la revista del grupo de investigación italiana sobre el trabajo de origen y de la tradición alejandrina. Pues el título de su keynote lecture, the title of his keynote lecture is Vulnerability as a Universal Human Condition, Responses in Manichaean Text and Early Syriac Writings. Professor Camplani, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you also for the invitation, in particular to Alessandro Saggioro and Alessandra Vitullo. I will discuss some texts and topics that are connected to ancient religion, in particular with Manichaeism and Christianity in the eastern part of the empire. So I am a scholar of ancient Christianity and ancient Gnosis. This is my competence, and so it is not so easy to find a connection with today's speculations and reflection on vulnerability and the ancient one. But this is very interesting from my point of view, because it is interesting to see how ancient texts and movements tried to focalize and some topics as non-violence and vulnerability from their point of view in a system that is very different from our system. And in a culture that was very different from our culture. But I think that some connections can be established. So non-violence and vulnerability can be connected from the ancient world to today because some features of these topics are in common, while others are very different. I put a question, a point that is very central in my text, the theme of sexuality and of reproduction and so on. This is a theme that is very marginalized and demonized in some texts. So Manichaeism and also ascetic Christianity have not a good opinion about sexuality, and this is very strange for us, strange also for the today relationship between Christianity and the macro theme of sexuality. But at the same time, there are other meanings that can be connected with our speculation on vulnerability. So, two set of texts you see here in this image that is behind the screen, the seal with which Mani probably sealed his letters. This is a hypothesis, we don't have a real demonstration. His letters to his communities in Mesopotamia, but also in other parts of Iran, etc. You see here, Mani Shlicha Damshicha, di Mashiach, that is Mani, the apostle Yeshua Mashiach, that is the apostle of Jesus Christ. This probably was, it is a Pauline quotation, so you have Mani that is inspired by Paul of Tarsus as Martian, but at the same time he's trying to found a new religious movement. There are a lot of new things about Manichaeism in the last, I think, 30 years. That is the Australian and excavations in Egypt, in particular in the Dakhla oasis in Kelis, where new houses and documents have been discovered, and which will give some help in understanding the theme I'm dealing with. Here you see we are in the desert, but this desert was not a desert, was an oasis. And an oasis where people were living, where retired soldiers of the Roman army were living and were reading Isocrates, Cicero in Latin, in Greek. And Manichaean families were discussing, were debating with the Christian of the Greek Church, the Christians of the Greek Church that were present and who have left some traces of their presence. So we are in a situation in which we can, for the first time, catch some of the real life of those Manichaeans. Here and there we perceive the idea of being persecuted or being marginalized by the Greek Church, so we could understand that there is a sense of vulnerability of the communal life, but we will see in a moment that vulnerability is the main concern of Manichaeism on the basis of their dramatic vision of the history of salvation. Here is a document, just to finish with that part. For the first time we have private letters. Private letters here written in Coptic, in Greek, in some cases also in Syriac, where they express their everyday life needs, but also the concerns for the education of their sons and their daughters, the necessity to understand and to learn Ment Romaios, that is the Latin language, and the Egyptian language that is Coptic, because these can be instruments and means of religious propaganda. Now we are in this moment in the first part of the 4th century, that is immediately after the Great Persecution, and in a moment where when Christianity is expanding all its structure. So there is a competition between the religions. Here you see that there is a presbyteros that is written here. The presbyteros is not the Catholic priest, but is one of the clerks of the Manichaean community. And there are also literary texts in Greek. It is the first time that we have so much Greek for Manichaean expressions of religious thought. And here the last document I will show to you is the glossary, a translation on a table, a wooden table, of Syriac expressions that are part of religious texts into Coptic, from Syriac into Coptic. This is the demonstration that the lot of texts we have in Coptic deriving from Fayyum, from Medina et Madi, probably were not translated from Greek, but directly from Aramaic, Manichaean Aramaic, that we can was very similar to the Syriac of Edessa and Mesopotamian Syriac. Now we only have to do only with 2 points. The first one is the phases of expansion of Manichaeism. You know that it is a universal religion, it is a trans-regional religion. We have texts in Greek, in Coptic, in Syriac, but also in Iranian languages. And Mani wrote also one of his writings in Iranian, devoted to Shapur, to the king of Persia, to the emperor of Persia. But also in the East, you see the expansion of Manichaeism in a lot of territories until China. And we have traces, textual traces of this in Uyghur texts, so the antecedent of the Turkish language, and also in Chinese. Here we have to understand why it is so important to describe in 1 minute the drama of salvation in Manichaean texts. You see here that vulnerability changes its significance, its meaning, according to the religious system in which it is inserted. This is for us, it's very important also to make a possible comparison within the different systems. Today I will try to compare 2 sets of texts. Here you have the drama of Mani, that is an original separation between the realm of light that is peaceful without violence, and this is very important for us, and the reign of darkness. So when we say that a person is a Manichaean, at least the original situation of the first time, of the first phase of the drama is corresponded. You have a population of demons populating the darkness, and the darkness is aggressive. Darkness has a desire for light. So there is, yes, a separation, but also an imbalance between the 2 principles. What is the origin of the original incident? This is a very important category of history of religions. In particular here in Rome, Ugo Bianchi, when I was a student here, gave a lot of lectures about the category of original incident or accident. The original accident is the decision by the Father of Greatness, that is the chief of the realm of light, or the kingdom of life, to offer himself to darkness in order to debilitate, in order to delay the aggressivity of darkness. So it is an offering. This is a system that is very different from the Gnostic systems. Where there is no Sophia, the sin of Sophia. In Manichaeism, there is a typical Pauline self-offering of a divinity to the darkness. And from this point on, the great drama becomes the time of mingling. So light and darkness are mingled together. And the creation of the world is a system to create, it's a system to favor, to stimulate the deliverance of light from darkness. And this is true also for ethics. So the man, the whole creation, the creation of the human being is all meant to give freedom to light. And also our behavior is something that is tied to this point. I will show only some moment of this great drama, but our point will be that it is the life, the everyday life, which is important from this point of view, because everyday life is a continuous relationship with a world where light and darkness are strictly mingled. And the problem, the knowledge, the gnosis, is to distinguish the two elements. Here, just to show to you the lake silk rolls of a Chinese provenance, where the drama of light is described. This is a beautiful roll, a lake, coming from a private collection, where you can see the 10 skies that are around our world, and in the upper part, the paradise of light, where light have to ascend in order to be freed and in order to return to the realm of light. Soteriology, Manichaean soteriology is this one, is that one. In the paradise, you see there are some figures. For example, here we have Mani, Zoroaster, Buddha, and Jesus. All the great religious leaders of the past are the seals of religion. And here I will only deal with some topics relating to the ethics. You have here the Codex Manichaeus Coloniensis, that is a biography of Mani that was discovered in the library of Köln in the 70s, 69, 70, that narrates the first years of Mani until his meeting with Shapur, with the king of kings of Persia. You know, it is the first to have a biography that is a kind of a hagiography of Mani. It's very important for us, not so much for understanding his life, as all hagiographies, this text has its own provenance, but to understand the mentality. And one of the main points is the relationship between this text and the behavior of Mani's faithful towards nature and towards the other the other human beings. That is, the main feature is non-violence. Why? Because the light is everywhere, is imprisoned in the world. When you see a tree, when you see water, when you see the fire, when you see another being, violence and also agriculture and also techniques are not to be used, especially by the first level of faithful, because it is a damage against light. It avoids, it is an impediment to light to return to the realm of light. So, there are, according to Augustine, who was a Manichaean, three signacula that are the seal of the mouth, the seal of the hands, and the seal of the breast. The first indicates purity and nutrition that should not be nutrition with meat. A seal of hands is avoiding the use of avoiding violence, and the seal of breast is virginity and continence. So I will skip the problem of truth. Many disciples should in every situation of their life say the truth, and in particular the religious truth. But non-violence is really a very important problem. It's one of the, I think in the ancient world, one of the most insisted and the most stressed themes that is typical of this religion. Every act must be avoided that could harm the living dimension of all creation, where light is imprisoned in the state of mixture. So one must not harm the five elements, light, fire, water, wind, air, or the earth with agricultural work, or animal and plant creatures. Attention to the world and cosmic life directs all the attention and consciousness of the elect. The second commandment forbids the elect from engaging in any violent act liable to injure one of the five elements, etc. So you have a clear imposition of non-violence as one of the five most important behaviors because of vulnerability of nature. Nature is made of light and darkness, and violence is not to be used against the nature, and also other people and also animals, because there is the doctrine of transmigration and the possibility that the soul of other human beings be transformed and transported in wild animals or in vegetables, and so the soul could be present everywhere. I would underline one point, that this presence of light in all nature and all human beings is called, it is light, Genestos, with human beings, this presence is called the crux luminis, that is the cross light, and Jesus patibilis, Jesus that is suffering. This is the problem. And this is the one point. The second point is that the God of the Old Testament is a violent one. It has anger, it has violent attitudes towards the sinners, and so on. And for that reason, this God cannot be the father of greatness. So here we have a typical Gnostic and Marcionite distinction between the true God and this kind of God, the Old Testament God that is not good, and in a pessimistic evaluation of Old Testament economy. And this is very interesting for the discourse I will face in a moment. Just to show that we have a lot of texts about what I said. For example, some episodes of Mani when he was young, and he was part of a community of Baptists, a Jewish Christian sect, which practiced agriculture, which practiced the collection of water, of wood, etc. And here we have a lot of miracles in which it is said that nature cries, that nature and trees are full of blood, and when someone is cutting the branches, blood is going out, and so on. So this is very interesting to see this one. I will pass, we have no time to read it all this work, words, but I finish only by stressing one point, that is a distinction in Manichaeism between two levels of community. That is absolutely central in the ecclesiology of Mani. That is the auditores, that is the lower level, people that are married and that can have possessions, that are stable, and that can also practice agriculture, but they have also to answer, to have a confession of sins, in which it is said that they are pardoned for being forgiven for having used mechanical instruments to produce the bread or to produce something to eat. And a second level, that is the elect, oi electoi, that is the one who permits, who allows the light to go up through their ethical activity, through their also eating a lot of vegetables that are full of light. So, I will go now to another system. So only one text. We are still in Mesopotamia. We are in the 4th, 5th century. And there is a great book that was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century. That is the Liber Gradum, or Book of Steps, or in Syriac it is Kfava Damaskov. That is a book, a handbook of spiritual life. Why it is so interesting? Because I think that it is a response to Manichaeism that was in the same country with the construction of a kind of community and of ethics that are similar but opposed, similar to that of Mani, but opposed to his main principles, that is, in particular, the dualism, the mingling of light and darkness. So here you will find the stress on only one God, a clear and very convinced monotheism, and the continuity between Old and New Testament. This is the new thing. There are 30 sermons, as you see here. That describe various styles of Christian spirituality, with particular emphasis on two levels. Pay attention, two levels as in Manichaean system: justice, kenutha, and perfection, gnirutha. Differently from the text proposed in the first part of the paper, it offers of God the classical vision, the one which was typical of the great church. There is only one God who created all things. So creation is not the consequence of an accident. Through his Son, and sent at the end of time Christ to reconcile the world with him. What is original is the insistence on the spirit paraclete that the faithful has to draw towards him in all his life, I would only suggest a connection with Manichaeism, where Mani has a continuous colloquium, a continuous conversation with the paraclete, that is a joining notion that has been transformed in the course of time. So two levels, the ways or paths of spirituality are distinguished by their evangelical radicality, and thus, like in Manichaeism, the lower way of justice is reserved to those who choose to live married, so the sexual life in a family with possessions. The higher way of perfection is designated for those who severed their ties with the world, adhering to evangelical recommendations in the most literal sense, choosing humility in all situations, to the extent of considering themselves inferior to every human being, even criminals. Both Old and New Testament speak of these two levels. So the Old Testament is not reserved to the God of anger and the terrible God of the Old Testament, but both have two ethics. The economy of salvation is one, and I refer to the same one God. In an anti-dualistic sense, the Book of Steps asserts that there is no distinction between a just God and a perfect God. In an anti-Manichaean sense, the author aims to emphasize that the distinction between these two levels does not undermine the uniqueness of the final salvation. And this is very different from Manichaeism, where the final salvation is reserved in particular to those elected that will become light, while the other, the married person who helped the elect to live, will be reincarnated in other existences. And the primary religious and moral reference of this term is the Imitatio Christi, within which Jesus is defined as the most humble who loves humility. This humble love, you see here, does not judge, is exercised towards the good and the bad, refraining from labeling Judas as a traitor or naming sinners explicitly. However, according to the Book of Steps, humility and lowliness is not an exclusive characteristic of Jesus. It is shared, albeit to varying degrees, by several biblical figures, including Abraham, Moses, Noah, Job, Paul, Mary. What is the ethics of this Liber Gradum? Is again non-violence, sinners, heretics, and this is very. If you see all the Christian texts of the 4th and 5th centuries, things are changing. Violence can be accepted against some form of religious deviance. But here, above all, the higher level must not exercise judgment about heretics, about sinners, about idolaters, and have not to use violence or to invoke from the state the use of violence. So I think my final thesis is that here we have a kind of the response to the Manichaean system and to the idea of vulnerability that is different in both texts, but in a sense stimulates a kind of attitude that is similar. That is to say, non-violence and attention to vulnerability has different meanings into the two systems, but has also a historical connection. Liber Gradum is not understandable without Manichaeism. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Camplani, for this rich and thought-provoking contribution, which brings together two different religious traditions through a comparative approach, which is sounds really original. I would like to ask you, to the organizer, Alessandra, how much time do we have to discuss and debate? 50 minutes and then a coffee break. Then, okay, thanks. I have a couple of questions just to break the ice, and then I will leave the floor to any other question by our colleagues here. The first things I would like to stress, or I would like to ask you to stress a little bit more. It's something that you elaborate a little bit more in the abstract you sent me yesterday, but it's something that you probably had to cut a little bit by your reading your text now. It's the fact that vulnerability in this two religious system is not limited to human sphere, but is distributed across all form of life, across nature. It means a sort of response against violence against nature. And it sounds really promising in a comparative sense, as I think it allows us, as a scholars in religion and spirituality, to move beyond only an anthropocentric perspective and to recognize vulnerability as a broader problem. So it's really speaks to our modernity, and something that you could probably elaborate a little bit more. Then I have another question, which is something that I would like you to address a little bit more. It's the dialogue or the competition between these two religious systems, how they look at themselves. So you said at the end of your talk, and that's something I am really curious to know a little bit more. And then I think one of the most interesting aspect from a sociological point of view in the study of this kind of religion that we could, at least in a certain sense, generalize is is the fact that in both of these systems there are two different parts of society related. There's a sort of distinction between these two parts of society. Auditores and electoi in the first part, and the Syriac models, they are the righteous and the perfect at the same time. So is this kind of response to vulnerability, is this ecclesiological structure in this different religious system our strategy for managing against vulnerability? And to what extent this different structure reflects sociological dynamics? I mean, mechanism for distributing authority and charisma within the group. And I will say a little bit more. I mean, this cosmology function also as a sort of justification for social structure. I mean, on a comparative ground, these two different models raises some kind of important issues in my perspective. What is the role of ordinary members of the community vis-a-vis with spiritual elites? And does this distinction risk creating a sort of split between an everyday ethics and an ascetic ideals? It means it's especially intriguing when it comes to this cosmology function as a justification for social structure. In a Weberian terms, we could ask whether the divide between the laity and the specialist is instituted by the theology. I mean, cosmology seems to shape the organization of social and spiritual life and offer a sort of creative response to the universal problem of evil, of vulnerability, which means a theodicy, the attempt made by any religious system to explain or justify the presence of suffering and evil in the world, despite the existence of any kind of divine power, is always, any theodicy is always a sociodicy. I mean, which is the effort undertaken by dominators in a group to justify the social order as exactly it is, meaning to their own advantage, which means you stress more on the general aspect of cosmology, but this cosmology is always a way to produce a social structure.
Very complicated questions. and a lot of questions. I begin with nature and with the world, or the world of nature that is beyond humanity, beyond human beings. Yes, for Manichaeism, this is absolutely central. In a sense, you have a kind of gnosis in which there is a kind of a physical speculation on light. And you have less, if compared with Gnosticism, the idea of the individual soul soteriology, and more the stress on the collective soteriology of all the particles of light that are spread in the world. So all nature is full of life. Also the terrible insects that are full of light, and this light must be defended. This is not typical in the normal Christian systems. When I see, for example, Augustine, that has a lot to say about Manichaeism, but also other texts, you don't have this attention paid to nature. Here and there, in some apocryphal tales, you find animals speaking, or the nature of trees that are speaking. But generally, this is not to express their suffering. Is, for example, to give a miracle or to give a revelation. In Manichaeism, the idea that nature is suffering, that is, has its root, of course, in Paul of Tarsus, in the idea that all nature is suffering, is a typical Manichaean idea that I don't find, for example, in the Liber Gradum. Liber Gradum stresses the idea of non-violence as the correct attitude of the higher level of Christians, but with not so great an attention to the problem of trees or animals. Here, only here and there, but it's very limited. So this is typical of Manichaeism. So in a sense, we have attention to the problem of nature, of ecology, more in a dualistic situation than in a monistic system. This is the first question. The second question is the second question was yes, about
competition.
The competition, about the competition of Liber Gradum in Mesopotamia. Mani is one of the great movements of late antiquity in Persia, in Iranian context. But he is aware also of what is happening in the Roman Empire. So it is a man that gives great stress on languages. He writes in two languages, Aramaic and Middle Iranian, but his disciples are able also to write in Greek and other languages, Coptic later. So the problem is competition. Yes, it is one of the competitors. This is important. He knows the Gnostic tradition. He writes, for me, is one of the most important episodes on which I'm writing a little book for Studi Materiali di Storia Religioni. That is the idea that Mani sent a letter to Edessa. Edessa is the center of Syriac Christianity. It was a bilingual city, Greek and Syriac. We have inscriptions, etc. The idea is to criticize Bardaizan, that was agnostic present in Edessa, and to convert Christians in Edessa to the new religion that is Mani system. So it is a competitor. At the same time, he becomes a target of a competition, that is a Liber Gradum, and also other form of Syriac Christianity, but other form of Christianity in the empire, in the Roman Empire, are forms of competition, who are the eunuchs of the gospel of the kingdom of heaven. But I think that we cannot separate this two-level community from the cosmology. So it is difficult to say what is first and what is second, but I would not say that cosmology is built on an already system of two-level Christians, because two-level Christians are typical of Syriac Christianity also in a monistic system. So I don't see an immediate connection. But this two-level system is very important because it allows to formulate a theory of freedom of light that is concrete. So you have persons that are able to free and to give freedom to light because their behavior is particular, their diet is particular, their non-bias is absolute. But they need to have the others. So, in a sense, I understand the problem of sociology, because they need to have a person. We have the letters today. This is really a great discovery. We have the personal letters, private letters of people, in which it is clear that the master is requesting from the married people food, support for voyages, fellowship for voyages. Really fellowship because we have to send the son of Tito as in Beirut to study Latin and to study Greek. And it is clear that there is a need for the second level. And this is really a problem. I do not think that cosmology is a justification, but I think that dualistic system need also a two-level community. It is interesting that also the monistic Liber Gradum is following this model, but I think because this model was, I don't know why, successful.
Thank you. So it's more Max Weber and less Pierre Bourdieu. Okay. I don't know if you have...
I am a conservative.
I don't know if you have more... If we have more time, some questions, comments. I think you should come here to...
Oppure possiamo anche riprodurla.
Yeah, I think we have time. There are times that we have. Yeah.
Yes.
So I am from Turkey and I'm working for non-Muslim minorities in Turkey, and one of the communities
We need a mic.
You need to use the mic.
Anche quell'altro piccolino lì addosso.
Io ho fatto un macello.
Thank you.
Non ci arriva. Non ci arriva.
But we can... possiamo ripetere qua la domanda quando...
Sì, meglio. Ok.
Here, short question. I'm not going to do it.
You are studying Turkey.
Yes.
Edessa is in Turkey, just to say.
Okay. Turkey. They changed the name, that's why we need to call it Turkey. Now it was Turkey, but now Turkey. It's Turkey. Yeah. So, one of the communities that we represent is Syriacs, also Chaldeans. So I have a couple of questions. The first one is about non-violence. There is a thing that I noticed about Syriac priests in Turkey, that they don't consume animal products, they just eat fish, while others have no problem. But only Syriac Orthodox, not the Catholic ones.
Yeah.
Not the Syriac Catholic. I don't know if you have any idea, if you have any comments about it, but it's a thing that is interesting for me. And the second thing is, do you think Syriac language is dying? Because in Turkey there are approximately 30,000 Syriacs, and most of them are not speaking their language. And the third question is a disagreement that I keep witnessing between, in Turkey, the Armenians and Syriacs in Turkey, the Christians. They both say that they are the first to accept Christianity and they can never have an agreement about it. So do you have any comment about
yes,
this?
I can answer to your questions, but we are going out my topic because today's Christians in Turkey are heir of the great church that is not Manichaeans, not Mandeans. We should remember that the Mandeans, that are a movement similar to Manichaeism, are still present in Iran. So we should. We met here in Rome, some Mandeans, when the community of Sant'Egidio organized the prayer of peace. But just to say that these are uses that are their root in the modern times, so the differentiation between Catholics and Orthodox Syrians about the eating of meat, it is a modern usage. I don't know in ancient times any root of this kind of differentiation. We can also take into account that in the Gospel of John it is said that Jesus after the resurrection ate fish but not meat, and I think that this could be a reference text, but I would not stress too much this different problem. As to the other questions, is
The language is dying.
look, Syriac language is not. It's a classical language, but it was transformed in the course of time, and there is a Neo-Syrian language, Neo-Syriac, you can call it in a lot of ways, that is spoken in 2 or 3 villages in Syria and in Iraq. Lula, and so there are 2 or 3 villages where it is spoken, but of course nowadays it's kind of folklore. Liturgy is normally in Arabic. Here and there are some points of the liturgy in which the Syriac language is used, such as Coptic in Egypt. Coptic in Egypt, the liturgy is in Arabic, but here and there emerge Coptic sentences that are used for respect to tradition. It is difficult to support this, also because Christians are not in an easy situation today in Turkey, and I know I have a lot of demonstrations of this, and I think that also this is a problem for the maintenance of language. When you are persecuted or you are in a difficult situation, it is difficult to preserve a minority language. It is a pity. It is a pity. I think that also minority languages should be defended and preserved. It is a kind of a vulnerability. And the third question is
who accepted Christianity first, Armenians or the Syrians?
yes, that is the question. Of course, pay attention to all the history of origins. All are ideologically oriented. So we have in Eusebius, we have book 1, chapter 13. We have the famous mention of the exchange of letters between Abgar, the king of Edessa, and Jesus. And the conversion that should have apostolic origins. Of course, these are constructions. And also for the Armenian, we have yes, a conversion of Gregory the Illuminator, very before Constantine. But also here we should try to pay attention that we do not have real documents and a real historical document that can support such an idea. I think that Christianity was present before Constantine, both in Armenia and in Edessa. This is sure, because we have, for example, in Edessa, a new inscription had been discovered with crosses and Old Syriac, and in Armenia also we have letters that are directed to Armenian clerics already in the 3rd century. But before, yes, it is not an Armenian state or a Syriac kingdom that is becoming Christian. These are probably legends, and pay attention to these legends.
Thank you so much.
I think we had another question, but I see Alessandro with a threatening gaze right there. So
yeah, maybe
very.
Thank you very much for a very good lecture. I'm interested in the relationship between Manichaean mythology and the teaching of Saint Augustine. Did Augustine ask Manichaean mythology and ethical implication in his theology?
That's not a short
There is not here my friend Gaetano Lettieri, but I think no. I think that he was a real convinced Manichaean for a long time, I think 9 or 10 years. So he was an auditor, he was not an elect. He was and he knows a lot. Augustine is fundamental for our understanding of Manichaeism. We have also texts that are preserved only by him. So it is a source really, and he's a very intelligent person. But I think that there is a tendency in the scholarship to connect his last theology to his youth adhesion to Manichaeism. I think that the two are not so connected. Because I think that the last part of his theology is a kind of turning point that he had around the end of the 4th century, around the theme of grace. That is a typical Pauline category. And I think that he's very original in insisting on the theme of grace, on the secondary status of our works for obtaining salvation, of the absolute liberty of God to give salvation to everyone, also to the criminals. But I think that here it is not necessary to use his Manichaean adhesion. I think that we can understand the Augustine of the second phase, the one in which he speaks about the massa damnationis, a terrible one, but as founded on a kind of turning point of his personal attitude that is already visible in his confessions. Already in the confession you see that God is intervening in his life beyond his merits. And Augustine says he has no merits.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Professor Camplani. Now we have a 15-minute break for a coffee break. 50 minutes?
50 minutes, so thank you Sergio Botta, thank you Professor Camplani.
We have a 15-minute coffee break on the 3rd floor in front of Chapel Room, okay? And then lunch we move downstairs.